Good morning. Wait, the camera's backwards. I'll point that way. That way. Just making sure. I like to sleep on things. Want to give myself a moment to reflect on the interview yesterday. And if you haven't seen it, please watch. About the 70 nations and the Noahide laws. So here are a few of my thoughts. Throughout and after reviewing the interview, it was clear to me that he was sincere. In fact, um, there was no evidence of lying as a motive. Um, Now, just because somebody isn't lying doesn't mean that they're speaking the truth. Hopefully, you guys understand that simple aspect of logic. But I don't believe at any time was he attempting to lie, and I base that off of my um, experience with facts. Uh, you may think I'm saying the word FACTS. I'm saying the word FACS, also known as facial action coding system. I think that some of my questions elicited more than I expected, which was good. And I'm definitely looking forward to um, the next time. Specifically, if I get the opportunity to speak to one of the Talmudic educated individuals, the ones who call themselves rabbis, or each other. They don't just call themselves that. So, so yeah, kind of a big thing. And allegedly, I'm only the second individual slash journalist to have engaged in a conversation. So here's here's what I think about that. I think there's been a deficit of people attempting to go to the source, and over again, there's just too much laziness in our culture. People that just are interested in getting distilled information and aren't willing to go to the source because not everybody's lying to you. But just because somebody isn't lying doesn't mean that they're telling you the truth. And it doesn't mean they just might not know everything about it. They might be taking something out of context. What I mean by that, and I said this in the video, because I've encountered various stories, like the Pantera thing, for instance. Um, a lot of those things aren't made very public, even amongst the folks that are in group the group together. So if you make the assumption that everybody has this on their mind, you've made a gross rationalization or a gross generalization, and it will inevitably lead to prejudice. That is exactly what that means when you believe a generalized fact about every single person. There are people on this planet that belong, are loyal to, are allegiant to evil, sin, Satan himself, that still have hope to know the truth despite their allegiance. So you could spend your time criticizing, getting enraged, maddened, condemning, judging, whatever. For even those of us that are saved by grace through faith, the law is still there to help remind us the ways that we didn't. I mean, the way that we're saved is supposed to be a reminder to us that we didn't do it ourselves, not by our own strength. So who are you, if you happen to be listening to this? Who are you to look at other sinners and consider yourself less of a sinner as compared to them? All sin leads to the same place. You were at one point on the exact same path as your most hated enemy, considering your enemy is on the path to hell. They might not be anymore. You never know. There are ways to know, of course, don't get me wrong. But I just want to make sure it's clear that if you're struggling with identifying a group of people in the same way, slow down. I wouldn't be so quick as to think that you can identify who the wicked are, for instance. Don't take the easy way out. The answer, by God's design, is relationship. You think you know someone? Prove it. Prove it to yourself. You think you're too good for that? Hmm, sounds like a hard issue. Um, this is part of Ezekiel 14 for the reference that I just had up this morning. Now, from Ezekiel 13, there is some important information. I'm going to repeat. Uh, you can scroll back in the video, read for yourself, or pick up your Bible. This is just Ezekiel. I just want to clarify a verse, or rather highlight it. There are many who claim to bring peace, but it is not peace that they bring. This is the word of God. Just keep that in mind. Meaning, read this and learn this in context. What's going on here? Grab a commentary. But it's very interesting. Very interesting. Let's see. How much time do we have here? All the time in the world. All the time I need. So, dreams are a very interesting situation. So I had a dream last night where I was somehow in a large corporate environment. I was a visitor for some reason. The person who was leading me around, showing me the different buildings and offices and facilities and such, was an individual about 6'4", 6'5", low middle age, 43, 44, somewhere in there. And this is an odd detail, but it's part of, it's got significance to the story. He brought up the topic of his teeth and how he was planning on getting um, the Da Vinci veneers or whatever. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. But basically, a a, a brand new Cadillac in his mouth is how they put that. What he desired and what he wanted was a good $40,000 to $60,000 in his mouth. He he basically wanted all new teeth, um, and for them to look very nice. This was what he wanted, and apparently some of his coworkers knew about this. He was slightly a neurotic man in as much that he wanted to look nice and give off a good appearance, those sorts of things. But he was also a man that lacked backbone. It's interesting. So I witnessed the way that two specific co-workers treated him, and I was just a witness the first time to someone that uh, now I don't really remember any of the names, but I remember the context of how they spoke to each other. So let's say his name was Steve Hampton. Okay. Well, his coworker, who had known him for 20 plus years, okay, they had been working together for at least 2 decades. It was made known at some point. Was a higher ranking yet gamma individual. Went to Steve. It's like, Steve, um, and Steve, being a man without a backbone, wanting to do things the right way, but yet lacking the fortitude to stand up for himself and the truth, and he corrected him. Hampton, why they're saying first and last name is not nearly as relevant as the fact that this was a game that this man's coworker played with him on the regular. I witnessed the first time, and then I witnessed a second time. Now as with all things, guys, there's gaps in this dream I had, many gaps. But at one point, after the second time I witnessed this, I uh, I put my foot down immediately to the coworker. I had no clout, but I had, for kicks and giggles, I'll just use this word. I had chutzpah. Um, I was going to stand for what was right. Said no. I put my finger on the man's chest, pushing him backwards. No, he didn't fall or anything. It wasn't that kind of dream. It wasn't. I wasn't using superpowers or anything. I was just confident that this man was in error. I said, no, you're not going to do that. You're not going to do that. The man played dumb, and I didn't. Oh, well, I mean, what are you talking about? That sort of thing, right? I said, you're not going to do that. You're not going to do that anymore. Not at all. Somehow, for some reason, I pushed him all the way back into an elevator, and I have a feeling that's symbolic for something. But being called out for his nonsense, I could tell it changed him. It's interesting. So then there was a woman, the corporate type, second level management, like number two to the top of the organization. Same thing, bullying, hateful towards this person who had been working, Steve Hampton or whatever the dude's name was, the dude that was showing me around. Hateful towards him because he uh, he had not stood up for himself. That probably hadn't helped, but that's it's not necessarily the point. Well, because he did stand up for himself, he deserved it. Well, I mean, he didn't stand up for himself. He's basically asking for it. There's sin in our world, guys. I get it. But on the other hand, uh-uh, uh-uh. See, the some of the significance to these two individuals who were essential bullies, corporate bullies, um, is the fact that they had the utmost pride, arrogance in their. They were both people that would have been perceived as nice people, as charismatic, as go-getters, right? Go-getters. And anyway, the woman did something similar. It was related to his health insurance for some reason, and they were making decisions for whatever reason about who would get what. And I overheard this conversation. I just happened to be the ghost like fly on the wall, basically, in this place. And I was looking at a list of people and a chart of names and pictures of all the different people in the organization that had needs. And this guy, Steve, call him, was being completely neglected, ignored, refused any of his earned um, benefits because his desires were perceived as unnecessary. All the while, each and every person I had become supernaturally aware in the dream, guys. It's a dream. I had become supernaturally aware of each of their frivolous, far more frivolous than even wanting teeth to be replaced. Far, far more frivolous. We're talking island homes, uh, extraordinary vacations, um, skiing lessons in the Swiss Alps, um, just absurdly frivolous desires, some of which they had pursued, and some of which just remained as dreams for them. And they were harshly critical against this man's hopes and expectations to get what was actually justly earned, but being withheld because of jealousy, judgmental, something else. There's some relevance to that story, to that dream. It's interesting. But I woke up with the primary thought of, in what ways do you quickly identify someone else's faults, sins, frivolousness, and pride yourself of your nobility, pride yourself on your amazing, mature interests? How often do we find ourselves looking at others' lives, looking at others in general, go, well, I, priding yourself on your virtues, I might say. So, after that interview yesterday, I'm left with the thought, first of all, you have nothing to be proud of. You have plenty to be thankful for. Well, I'd take that back. We have stuff to be proud about. Be thankful. Be thankful for grace. Because if it weren't for that, we'd all be destroyed pretty quickly in life. Rejoice in grace today. And as you rejoice in grace, make sure that you recognize that God desires everyone to be able to rejoice in that grace. So instead of ruling somebody out, pray for them. And don't neglect sharing the truth for the ones you love and the ones you would rather see dead. Pray for them and speak the truth. And do it with the love of Christ. Anyway, that's what I've got this morning. There will be more aspects of the interview that I'll discuss, but I'll probably do that in the forum of a group conversation because it was nearly an hour and I want to be well prepared for the next time. So love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. Don't forget to love him with all your strength.